Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Kiran, and if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I normally introduce myself as a doctor and a comedian. Junior doctor and a comedian. Junior doctor and a comedian. Junior doctor and a comedian.
Because it's true what they say about the Asian stereotype. A young Asian man is one of 3 Ds. You're either a doctor, a dentist, or a disappointment to your parents.
I did stand-up comedy for over 4 years, and in the last few years I took it really seriously. I got to the point where I was performing at some of the biggest clubs in the country. I did a comedy tour with a huge producer. I was having the best time. There was a point where I was considering taking a break from medicine just to pursue comedy, but then COVID hit and I was needed in the hospitals and there were no audiences to perform to anymore. This is the crazy story into my journey into the underground world of stand-up comedy. My journey began at university. There was some talent shows and fashion shows that were happening and there was auditions to host them. So I put myself forward, I went to these auditions and I got the part.
To Methil 2017, or as my mum likes to call it, that time of year we get to go to Kiran's University to try and find him a wife.
For these talent shows, I wrote bits in between the acts to talk to the audience about. And I ended up thinking, well, why don't I try and make it entertaining? And I tried to put some jokes in there. It went really well. And after the show, someone said to me, I loved those bits. That was my favorite part. And you could do that by itself. You don't need the rest of this show. And that was the start of my comedy. I put all of those little bits together and formed my first comedy set. And it's a funny character arc as well, because I ended up going back to this show and performing as a comedian, and then going back even after finishing university to judge this show. My first actual comedy show was a competition. It was called Tickle Pig and it was above a pub called the Library in Leeds. I applied online and got told I needed to do an 8-minute set, which I now know is quite a lot for a new comedian. Normal sets are around 5 minutes long for new comics. I used the material from the fashion show. I went online to look at some news articles and tried to make some funny jokes about those, put them together into a word-for-word script, and I learnt it off by heart. I practiced it again and again and again, and I was absolutely terrified. I lived with 5 other people at that time and they could probably tell you the script off by heart because I'd practiced it to them so many times. I went to the show and in the audience are about 12 people. I've brought 8 of them with me and 5 of them are my housemates, and they've obviously heard the set before. And I basically just recited this script that I learned, but I was so nervous, my palms were sweating, I can't remember the show at all. All I can remember is thinking about my lines and saying my lines. I didn't get through in the competition, but I did learn a couple of big lessons about comedy, which I understood later on. The first one is that set was way too rude. Too much rude language. I even used this at one point. There was a lot of really graphic stuff in there which I would never say in a comedy set today. But funnily enough, at that show was a girl from the Comedy Society who said, why don't you come and join the Comedy Society? I didn't even know that was a thing, but I went and joined them. Through the Comedy Society, I got my second gig, which was at a bar in the Student Union in Leeds called The Terrace. There was comedy going on in the corner, there was music in the other side of the room, there was a bar in the middle, and lots of people on tables eating and drinking, which is a recipe for disaster. A lot of the tables weren't even facing me, the music was quite loud, and there I was with my blazer, trying to tell jokes when people literally couldn't give 2 f***s about it. Even despite this being a weird circumstance and a weird show, I still absolutely loved it. And I got more and more involved in the Comedy Society. I ended up joining their sketch group in the Sketch Society called Fresh Milk, and we performed shows quite regularly.
Oh, why on earth did he chop off his leg? That's not going to do his public image aid.
I joined the improv group of the Comedy Society to try and hone my skills on my feet, to try and interact with people, and also I ended up doing more and more stand-up shows. Being a student was the best place to learn how to do comedy. There was absolutely loads of student shows happening. There was a group of people who you could meet up with to help write, to bounce ideas off, and because generally the shows were free, there was no requirement to have to be funny. You could say whatever you want, and even if it went terribly, it just didn't matter. You were just performing it to some students. When you start in comedy, you write a 5. A 5 is a 5-minute original piece of comedy. And after every set, I used to record my show to listen back to the laughs, either on video or on audio. I would listen back and think, are people laughing at these bits? And if after 2 or 3 shows, people weren't laughing at something I said, I would cut it out. Whereas if people were laughing, I would keep it in. And in that way, I would keep introducing new little bits in. So if my comedy set was 10 minutes long, I would be telling around 7 minutes of material that I knew was funny because I'd told it before, and about 3 minutes of newer material, but I'd sprinkle it in between. So it wasn't like 7 and 3, it was kind of in between, so people wouldn't know what was old and what was new. And if the new bits worked, they stayed. If the new bits didn't work, they got cut.
Brace yourself, I'm not very good at getting it in.
In this way, you can keep honing your skills and your set. So your 10-minute set gets tighter and tighter and tighter until the timing is exact, where the laughs are coming are exact, and you're really confident at what you're about to be saying.
I'm a student, I'm studying at university in Leeds. You guys are a bit closer. You can probably tell from the colour of my skin that I study medicine. My parents are very proud. And by proud I mean pushy. So here we are.
When I knew my set was fire is when I got invited onto the national comedy circuit. And this was through something called the Facebook Comedy Forum. Someone added me to this group, and it was a forum where promoters would promote gigs where they'd say, we need a comedian for this show, and loads of comedians would apply for it. They tell you where the show was, if it was paid or unpaid, how long the set was, what kind of experience you needed, and an email in which you could apply to them. So like applying to a job, you actually send them a CV. Your CV tells them your experience, has references on it. It's honestly like applying for a normal job. As someone with no comedy CV and no experience, I was applying for these random shows, and then occasionally someone would take a chance on me and give me a show based on a video that I'd sent them. I would then travel, sometimes 2-3 hours away, to do this little show in front of 20 people. You might think, well, that sounds really silly that I'm traveling 3 hours unpaid to do this little show, but actually performing in front of these new audiences is what strengthens your skills. Traveling somewhere new, telling jokes, is really what makes you stronger as a performer. These little 10-minute unpaid spots they call open spots. And once you've done quite a few open spots, you can add these to your CV to say I've done open spots here, I've progressed here. And if you do well at an open spot, they might give you a longer spot. And if you do well at the longer spot, they might give you a paid spot. The one thing I always said to myself was I would never say no to a show. So if I got asked to do a show, I would always say yes unless there was a definite reason why I couldn't do that show. The reason for this is that you don't know the opportunity that you're going to get out of that show. You might meet someone might be in the audience. That strengthens your network and provides new opportunities for you. There's loads of little opportunities you get and people that you get to meet through comedy that if you didn't do that one show, you would never have got that opportunity. What people don't see is the hard work that goes into it. The traveling around, the antisocial hours, doing an 8-hour round journey for no money just to practice some new material. There's so much graft that goes into crafting the art. People see a comedian on stage and think, what an easy job. They're doing 20 minutes of comedy and are being paid £250. But it's like a boxer. You don't watch a boxing match and think, he's being paid £1 million just for this one match. It's not that one match, it's the 10 months of preparation that he's done to get ready for the match that he's being paid for. There was a point a couple of years in where I had a massive comedy breakthrough and I started performing in some of the biggest clubs in the country, touring, and it just got absolutely insane. This video is already getting pretty long, so I'm gonna have to make a part 2, but as always, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any videos. This one was a little bit different, a story about me. I hope you enjoyed it. In part 2, I'm gonna talk about my breakthrough and how I turned into someone who did comedy into what I would consider a semi-pro comedian. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.